There are several different ways to record a computer screen, and in the past, I've used QuickTime Player, I've used OBS, and I've also used an excellent paid application on a Mac that's called ScreenFlow, and they all actually do a really good job at recording your screen. But, they actually all present more challenges when I need to quickly just document a new process for someone. Maybe I need to develop my DaVinci Resolve course lessons, or simply record a YouTube tutorial. And that's because they tie up system resources, and some they even require me to wait while the computer encodes the recording into a video file afterwards. And that's just wasted time. So in comes the 7-inch Blackmagic Video Assist 12G recorder monitor. Aside from the fact that it made my Sony FX3 all new again by recording pristine quality Blackmagic RAW, it also is my daily driver for recording my Mac Studio computer screen in 4K ProRes LT directly to an external SSD, and I can even edit right off that thing. So today, I'd love to share with you all the little tiny settings, the cables, and a necessary app called Better Display to get everything running smoothly. So I went with the 12G model because it records 4K up to 60 frames a second. The older model just does 1080p. So I wanted the 4K, so that's what the 12G represents. And then I got the 7-inch model because it has an XLR audio input over here. So this is so I can record my microphone and have this be completely isolated in the recording compared to the DaVinci Resolve computer playout, which will come over channels 1 and 2 over this HDMI input. But just so you know, all the little cables I'm using that are plugged in here, it seems like a lot, but it's actually not that complicated. This one's just a locking power cable, so I don't have to run this off battery power and worry a battery's gonna go out at some point. The next one's the HDMI cable. The one I'm specifically using, you could pretty much use anything as long as it's a good cable, but it's got a right angle, which is nice, so it goes straight down. And it's a 10-foot cable. It's an ultra thin 8K HDMI 2.1 cable from Thus Cords, I think is what it's called. But I'll put the link down in the description. The affiliate links help support the channel. The other thing I've got here is the XLR input. You might notice this is a very tiny XLR. It's called a mini XLR. And basically what this is, it's a Condor Blue mini XLR to a full-size XLR. And it's just a little short cable there for, you know, some of the newer cameras and stuff have these mini XLR ports. And then as far as recording to an external hard drive, which is a Samsung T5 up here, of course, pretty much any SSD you could probably use, but this one's worked well for me for a long time. I just keep recording over and over again. The main thing is get a good cable. The cable I'm using here is actually a USB 4 or Thunderbolt cable with a 90-degree, and this one is actually not that expensive. It's just a 1-meter cable, and this one's from Chen Lennox. And again, this is some weird Chinese brand, whatever, but it works good. And so I'll put the link because sometimes finding the right cable that is fast enough that you can record in all formats, I think is a big deal. And I will say, like, the other piece of this that you probably don't need for screen recordings and is totally unnecessary is this cage. It's from Knights. And the reason I have it is because it has a locking port down here for the USB-C connection. So when I'm recording in the field, I don't have to worry about that coming disconnected at all. And it's been great. But again, if you're just using for screen recordings, you probably don't need the cage. Blackmagic Video Assist record settings. So you'll see at the top, you get a little bit of information what's going on. I've got ProRes LT, 2160p at 30 frames a second. There's sort of a trick to forcing this from the Mac, but let's just open up our settings and I'll walk you through everything. So we got the record tab. HDMI is what we're using, ProRes LT. ProRes LT is the good compromise between file size and quality. Audio settings. So I'm going to click the audio tab up here and we'll see what we've got for our audio settings. The first page is one that matters if you want to isolate a microphone input from the computer input, and that's changing this to PCM4 channels. The device itself can actually record 16 channels, which is pretty crazy. I just need 4. What I need to do though is I need to set PCM4 and then I need to set my record XLR inputs to channels 3 and 4, not to channels 1 and 2, because 1 and 2 are kind of reserved for this HDMI input, which is going to come from the computer. So 3 and 4 for the microphone, that's what's important on this page. And then if I click this arrow to go to the next page, you can see I'm recording mic level inputs. I've got plus 25 decibels of gain. This is the microphone you're hearing right now is not this mic, it's one sitting behind me, the Earthrix Ethos. But you have the option to include phantom power, which is needed if you have a condenser mic, which is perfect. And then the last page that really matters for screen recordings for me is on the setup page, the 4th tab over there. the third button down. So if you end up being on the first page, if you just get one of these, come to the third page across, you'll have a file name prefix. I set mine to CVT for Creative Video Tips. So this is the file name that's going to be written to the disk up here, which just helps you organize it, however you want to, including this one I think is kind of important, the timestamp file suffix. Turn that on, and then you'll always be able to track when the thing was recorded based off the, the date and time that was in the device. So to get back to the main screen, just click the settings icon at the top there. If you don't want to see all that extra gobbledygook on the bottom, you can just swipe up and swipe down. But to record with this device, it's as simple as pushing the record button right there. And you don't have to worry about anything. I've never had this thing not record like I have for ScreenFlow and OBS in the past. And once you're done, the file is already encoded. It's ready to be pulled right off of the hard drive is ready to be pulled right off and loaded into your computer and start editing. But before you go start recording at 2160p at 30 frames a second, we need to start talking about our Mac settings next. Mac display settings. So in system settings on your Mac, just come down here to displays. And this is where I'm actually going to control the frame rate and the fact that I'm doing a mirror. So I'm using an LG Ultrafine. That's my main computer display that I'm actually looking at and working from. I don't look at the Video Assist recorder monitor when I'm recording. But what I'm doing is if you come to BMD HDMI, I'm choosing mirror for whatever your main monitor is. I suggest it's a 16:9 monitor, not one of those ultra wides. And then right down here under refresh rate, this is where you can control the frame rate that is sent out back over here to the device. So you can see it's 2160p 30. The device is actually able to record 60, but I think because it's twice the file size, being twice the frame rate basically, I prefer to use 30, but you can of course choose 60 on the list here. It takes a moment for this to refresh. And now this is getting a true 60 frames per second recording. But you'll notice here, there's nothing that's talking about resolution that's being sent out the HDMI, right? I'm gonna change this back to 30. So how do I actually get it to mirror whatever size GUI that I want back out over here to 2160p? That's where an extra little software application called Better Display comes in. It's pretty inexpensive, but let me show you how I have Better Display set up to control my output to always be this 2160p. Better Display Pro. So this is the little application I run alongside my normal display settings on the Mac. And what it's going to allow me to do is set my computer display, this whole interface here, so that it looks like 1080p when I'm working, which is great because it means I can make, interface elements appear larger, which just makes it easier for you to see on a tutorial, while still mirroring out to a 4K output display for 4K recording on this display over here. So 1080p here, but 4K quality on here. That's what I wanted to do. And the settings are pretty simple. It just took me a while to find them, so I want to make sure I share those. In the menu bar up top here, upper right, come down to the settings cog for it. This is the application. It'll open up. And what I want to take a look at is the BMD HDMI output of here. So when it's connected, your displays should appear. And what I need to take a look at is just scroll all the way down here to this section here right towards the bottom where it says more system configuration options. Enable it, just turn that on, and then the edit native resolution, just manually override and change this to 3840 by 2160. And then I also have checked here the edit default resolution set to 3840 by 2160 at 30 hertz. What this is going to allow me to do is every single time over here on this display, it's going to get that 2160p 30, no matter the size of this GUI that I want to appear over here. And the way I change this all the time, because I actually edit at 1440p, because that's the native size for this display, but when I want to record, I actually try to always remember to change this to 1080p. So to change my GUI monitor that I'm actually working from, you don't even have to open up the settings anymore. Once the settings are set to those, you're good to go. I come down here to where it says LG Ultrafine, which is my main monitor, and I change this instead of saying 2560 by 1440, and I just drag this down to 1920 by 1080. It takes a moment, it refreshes, but you can see now this display here is acting like a 1080p monitor, which makes all these items here larger, and they're also mirrored the same way over here, except that they're recording at 4K. Does that make sense? Basically, I wanted to get interface items as big as possible so you can follow along in tutorials, but actually have a 4K recording so that we get good quality uploads to YouTube and course sites and that sort of thing. Audio output. Now this is all about recording audio and actually also being to hear it. Now if you just need to record it and you don't need to hear it over the same Mac, what you can easily do is in the system settings of your Mac, come down to sound, output, that'll be BMD HDMI, and then as long as inside of DaVinci Resolve your system user preferences, Command comma gets me there, system, this is set to use system settings. When you play back here, you take a look at the monitor, channels 1 and 2 should be recording audio from your computer. Channel 3 is the isolated microphone. And so they're separate so they can be cut and edited separately for a tutorial. Now, the problem with this setup is that I am not able to hear over my USB audio interface on my computer. So I want to give you one little step further about how you can actually use the tool that's over here called the Audio Midi setup to create a multi-output device on a Mac. Essentially what it does is it says we can send audio out of the Mac through the HDMI cable and through the USB interface at the same time. That's what this does here. The way you set it up is dead simple. There's a plus button at the bottom left of Audio Midi setup. This is just an application you can load up. And when you do this, we'll choose Create Multi-Output Device. And you see it created a new one for me. It doesn't have a name yet. Maybe I'll give this a name that I'll just call this one Demo, because I'll delete it afterwards. But essentially, it's going to say, what do you want to route out? I want to use the BMD HDMI output, and I want to use the Volt 2, which is just a plugged-in USB audio interface that I love, and basically just that's what my headphones are plugged into currently. And so I can listen over my headphones over the USB audio interface, and then instead of checking in system settings the BMD HDMI output, I would just choose the new aggregate device, which should appear in the list down here. You can see it's called Demo. Now when it plays out, yes, it will still play out over the Blackmagic Design monitor and record with that, but I'm actually also able to hear it over my headphones, which is important. Cursor Pro and Keystroke Pro. So just as a bonus tip, there's two little applications that I also use often in tutorials. One is called Cursor Pro, and when I turn it on, that gives me this circle outline that goes around my cursor. And I can actually also use it to zoom in dynamically as I'm showing something. I just hold the control key, and that's what gives this pop-up zoom element that's on screen, so it's easier to show stuff. The other one is by the same company, and it's actually called Keystroke Pro. So let me find it. It's in the list right up here. I say Enable Keystroke Pro, and now if I start using keyboard shortcuts, I've got 2 mapped to split a clip, and I've got 1 to trim it up. You can see you're able to see the keystrokes as I'm doing them, so I don't have to go edit those in later. They're baked into the screen recording over here on the video assist. My name is Chadwick. This is Creative Video Tips. Thank you so much for watching, and because there's so much more to learn, I'll see you in the next video.